Hello, everybody. Mike Butcher from TechCrunch here, and I hope you're having a lovely time here at WCIT DigiTec. It's my pleasure to announce our next panel, where we're going to imagine a world post-AI revolution and discuss forging an exciting future with AI. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to hear from Mr. Burj Ivazian, who's partner senior analyst and consultant at WCIT2024. Ms. Nancy Giordano, who's an exponential strategist, author at Play Big Inc., business futurist and best-selling author. Mr. Bart Simmons, director of Zeets Confidence, and Mr. Anders Halvorsen, who's vice president for global public policy at WIT SA. Ms. Frances West, who's an author, a TED keynote speaker, and founder of Frances West & Co. And finally, Ms. Stella Lupashaw, founder of Reframe Work. Our moderator for this discussion will be Professor Badr Busabat, an international speaker and expert in AI ethics and CEO at Cryo Moria. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your panel. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here because we are going to talk about an exciting subject: artificial intelligence and social transformation. You know, artificial intelligence, in my point of view, first, is definitely the most transformative innovation by far, because it will have an impact on all sectors and simultaneously. There are two dynamics going on. First of all, the idea of an increasing interconnection between sectors, and secondly, the acceleration of time, meaning that artificial intelligence development is getting on a faster path. But today, we have high-quality speakers who are going to deep dive into artificial intelligence development. That will help us to better understand what's going on, and definitely to think at the end of this panel that artificial intelligence might be the key role of our future. Please welcome our speakers with a hot and warm applause. Great. That's perfect. So I will leave the floor to our speakers to present themselves. We're going to start with Stella. Please introduce yourself to this lovely audience.
Absolutely. Thrilled to be here. And thank you for such a warm welcome. It's a beautiful country. My name is Stella Lupashaw. I am a consultant. I advise at the intersection of technology, analytics, AI, and human-centered design, all for the purposes of transforming the workplace experience for workers. I am a professor at NYU, teach a class on designing digital workplaces. I advise lots of startups that play in the space of HR tech, work tech, with the use of AI. So thrilled to be part of this conversation.
Frances?
Good afternoon. My name is Frances West. I'm the founder of Frances West & Co. It's a global strategy advisory company advising government and also private sectors, including startup, on digital accessibility or digital inclusion. It's based on 30-plus year work that I did at IBM as IBM's first chief accessibility officer, where we learned in IBM research how to apply technology to avoid the gap, a digital gap, for aging and people with disabilities. I'm also an author for a book called Authentic Inclusion Drives Disruptive Innovation. Happy to join the panel to speak from how diversity and inclusion is critical to the formation of a new technology such as AI. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances. Andres, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. My name is Anders Halvorsen. I am working with public policy for the World Innovation Technology and Services Alliance, covering all trade issues, AI certainly, but all digital trade. And I just wanted to mention that this is our 28th World Congress. and our second time in Armenia. So we are really excited to be back here. Thank you.
Please, Bart, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello. Nice to be here. I'm looking really forward to this conference today. I'm Bart Simons. I'm director of ZS Confidence Trust Services. We're in the business of helping national authorities implementing nationwide identity schemes. I've been doing so for a little over 20 years now. My interest here today is to discuss with you and share with you how AI impacts how we as individuals and national authorities perceive identity and how that might change in the future because of the use of AI.
Thank you, Bart. Please, Nancy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Giordano. Hopefully that works. Really excited to be back to my second WCIT conference. And in Armenia, one of my sons fell in love here a few years ago and has always wanted me to come back to Armenia or to see the country and the people. I am an exponential strategist. I work really in the intersection of business, technology, society, and consciousness. My passion is ensuring a safe and thriving future for all of us. I helped start an AI company 8 or 9 years ago, so I've been in this space for a long time. And I really do believe that every decision we make now is the thing that is shaping the future. And I'm particularly interested in the economic side of it. How do we build an economic model that meets the exponential impact and prosperity potential that AI provides? And certainly looks at it through the lens of women, started the Femme Future Society so that we can ensure that voice is more heard than we often get to hear it on the stage, and youth, that we're really thinking about how we prepare a future for the folks to come.
And now, the last but not least, Birch, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Berj Ayvazyan, and I've been working in Armenia for 20-odd years, developing the high-tech sector among our colleagues from the diaspora, and we have done some good things, mostly made mistakes, but we try to fix our mistakes before they have too big an impact. And now we're working on how we can drive AI to limitless growth within the ethical frameworks that we are trying to establish. And like Gado Armen, I don't agree with regulation, but I do think ethics has to be embedded in the AI framework so that we don't go crazy doing AI. But you'll hear from me soon. Let's go.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I told you about this high-quality audience. We're going to listen to such an interesting panel. I'm going to start with the first question. A few minutes prior, I say that artificial intelligence will have a big impact on all sectors simultaneously. So I had, let's say, an economic point of view about artificial intelligence, but we must know that ethics matter. And this is why today I'm going to start with this first question. Considering the profound impact AI could have on human institutions and cultures, what ethical guidelines should be put in place in order to ensure that AI development remains beneficial and aligned with human values? I'm going to start with Stella. You have an interesting perspective, a labor and work perspective. Could you tell us more about your point of view on that?
Absolutely. As someone who runs the company called Reframe Work, my superpower is to reframe things and help use different frameworks for people to remember and make it simpler to digest some of these complex conversations. So the framework I would like to use today, I refer to as 4 Ws. I see the world through these 4 Ws. One is the workforce, workplace, and worth. So if we take the impact of AI and how we can rethink what work is and how it's being defined, how it's being distributed, how it's being organized, priced, determined who will need to get the work done. Increasingly, that type of definition is done by AI. We have a lot of tools in the work environment that parse out job descriptions, look at the type of skills people possess based on their resume and other digital footprint they possess, and then determine who is the most qualified candidate. So increasingly, employment decisions are being made by AI, and it can open up opportunities, or it can be really a limiting factor in people's ability to earn family-sustaining income. So instead of thinking about constructs such as jobs and occupations, increasingly we can start using technology to determine what is the essence of what needs to get done, what is the work, and then based on that determine who is the most optimal match in terms of the worker. And when it comes to worker selection, it's not just the regular humans and employees in terms of regular employees or contingent workers. Increasingly, we have agents, digital agents, robotic agents that perform that work. So it's more critical to think what is that optimal mix and how do we ensure that the work that it's predominantly better done by humans is allocated to humans and not deferred to other types of agents to perform it. Based on that optimal mix of work to workers, then we can determine what is the most optimal workplace environment to get that work done, and not think in the same binary way, is it the office or the home office, but it's increasingly more nuanced. You can get the work done from a coffee shop in a virtual environment, virtual reality, on an island. So the more we can increase that flexibility in definition of what the workplace needs to be, and create that flexibility for the workers to choose and have autonomy out of where they work, the workplace, and then create and design it in a way that provides equivalent experiences for workers, regardless of where they choose. And that's where technology and AI can play a huge role. And then the last one is the worth, the value exchange between enterprises and individuals, because we bring our talent, our time, our insights, our wisdom to the work environment. Are we compensated in a way that we feel it's a fair exchange of value? We no longer can assume that the time spent in front of the computer equates to value produced, right? The definition of what value is in this new realm is changing too. So how do we ensure that individuals have the ability and access to the value they expect and need, depending on their life stage, depending on their career progression, ambition, depending on life circumstances that happens to them, in a way that it's equitable.
Thank you so much. You're definitely right. A workplace should be a key subject in our topic. And what is interesting is the following. Francis earlier mentioned the concept of inclusion. I would like to have your point of view on that. Is there any link between the concept of inclusion and the ethical standards we need to put in place in order to make our world better?
So the whole concept of ethics is a human value idea. So we are at the cusp of really embarking on this most profound technology journey called AI. And I think never in the history of the evolution of a technology that's more important that we have the human input in guiding the value and the purpose and the principle of this technology. Again, historically, the technology gets invented and then it was distributed to users. In this particular instance, it's absolutely crucial that we reverse the sequencing. That is, we have to have the participation of the diversity of the population, of the humanity, in the design phase. We're still in the early stage of AI, but we already know the important implication, good or bad. So I think this is one of the time where we cannot just think about technology for technology's sake. Earlier, I mentioned I wrote a book, and in my book, I talked about as technology gets more human needs to get human. In other words, especially as leaders, especially country like Armenia, where you have a rich history of humanity and the concept of religion or Christianity, you actually have the potential power and also the responsibility to instill that kind of a human value and concept into your technology development. Earlier we heard about how your education system is actually embracing AI, which is so crucial because our next generation leaders cannot, as a digital native that grew up with technology, with cell phone, cannot forget to think about the differences in humanity, both in age, because as we age from, from birth to death, there is a different requirement and different expectation. Also on abilities. Part of my work is with people with disabilities. We have to make sure that new technology does not create the digital barrier, but the promise for all.
Thank you so much, Francis, for your insights. A few months ago, I released a paper in collaboration with Swift on ethics and fairness in the financial sector. And it was so difficult to establish a framework in order to score fairness in the financial sector, specifically in the B2B context. So that's why I wanted to ask this question to Andreas. What do you think about the challenges, the current challenges, in terms of drafting ethical guidelines?
What the challenges are?
Yeah, what are the challenges as an expert?
Well, I think that there are many, many challenges, but I think that we are seeing a good progress towards cooperation. I think international collaboration makes sure that when companies do business, that they partner with civil organizations and with governments, both at the national but also at the international levels. We are seeing in our industry that there's a lot going on. In the US, for example, with in the Department of Commerce, with the AI Safety Institute, for example, there's a consortium with more than 200 stakeholders working together to develop ways to assess risk, to assess ethics, and so on. And you're seeing it a lot going on at the international level as well. Last week with the UN General Assembly, there's going to be mechanisms there to coordinate all of the good work that is being done. The AI Safety Institutes themselves internationally are going to meet for the first time in the spring of next year. And from an industry point of view, what we are very pleased about is that this is not going to be your traditional government powwow, but you're going to have stakeholders from all segments, civil society, industry, academia, and ethics is going to be very part of that equation. So I think we have universal ethical considerations, but how you implement them into your business, it needs to be done. It's a global technology, and the more coordinated we are, I think, and we are seeing good progress in that front. Thanks.
That's great. That's so interesting. That's why I also thought about asking Bart. The name, by the way, sounds like mine, so it's quite funny. We discussed a little bit before the panel. And you know, Bart, you told me that you have been traveling a lot. You have been to Japan, so you are, let's say, confronting cultures and trying to understand how AI could be, let's say, ethically guided. What's your view? What's your experience on that? Have you seen any ethical challenges on a daily basis with your counterparties?
I would not say on a daily basis. In my line of business, which is helping national authorities provide verifiable and reliable identities to citizens and legal persons or companies. One of the key elements is trust. In order for a party A and a party B, a person A and a person B, to engage in a transaction or in a collaboration without having known each other beforehand, it is important that they can establish each other's identity and additional information in a verifiable way, so that they can engage in a transaction that's mutually beneficial. I'm saying it in a pretty abstract way, but that's essentially what we all use identity for. And identity, we take it for granted. Identity, it's me, it's my name, it's my characteristics, it's what's on my ID card, it's what I use to open a bank account and prove who I am. And we all take that for granted. But I'm struggling to see how or what the impact will be of AI on that trust. Today, in many civilizations and countries, trust in the identity is implicit because it's an established practice. And I think AI has the potential to fundamentally change how we perceive trust. I will give one example which is very close by and present today. I will give a second example which is a bit further down in the future and a bit more out there. In the present day, we all want to use our smartphone for everything. So there is a national tendency for national authorities to introduce an equivalent of an identity, a travel document, a driving license, an attestation of your diploma, whatever it is, via your smartphone, typically in what is called a digital identity wallet issued by the national authority. Users expect that they can install the app and get going in 5 or 10 minutes time. And so they are accommodated by allowing remote onboarding, remote identity proofing. You don't have to go to a registration office anymore. You can register from home. And all of a sudden, the device that you have in your hand, that you bought yourself, now becomes a tool that you use to manifest your identity and to transact with the outside world. In this case, backed up by a government-issued identity, which the other party, the relying party, can trust. Now, this paradigm is threatened by the emergence of deepfake. Deepfake is essentially generative AI, where a synthetic person or an imposter person, but also synthetically generated, might try to enroll on your behalf and therefore steal your identity, and therefore, you have a problem. This will erode the trust that people have in such identity schemes. And what is the ethical way of dealing with that? How do you protect your citizens, your users, who you want to render a service, who you want to make their life better, make their life easier, you want to give services and give them access to those services? How do you ensure that all of that still remains possible, at the same time shielding them from potential threats of identity fraud or impersonation? Now, that is partially an ethical challenge, because you will have to make choices. Certain choices may impede certain rights for certain parts of the population, and you have to always then weigh, okay, what are the pros and the cons? So that's a perspective on ethics and AI in this specific domain, which is not easy to solve. Another example, let's take 10, 15 years into the future. AI is evolving incredibly fast. Imagine you can actually have your digital twin that can act on your behalf, that has learned how you behave, what your preferences are. It uses AI to get to know you. And you can actually delegate tasks to that digital twin, who will go out for you and do mundane tasks that you don't want to be bothered doing yourself. There as well, when that digital twin represents you and acts on your behalf, do you take full accountability? Because on one hand, you are the one using the digital twin. The digital twin has been trained to mimic you and understand your preferences and is acting on your instructions. But the technology behind it is not in the hands of the user. It comes from a huge technology company, whichever one it is. And this creates a big imbalance between, on one hand, us as individuals who are using or being exposed to AI, our government agencies who are there to protect us, to protect our rights, and technology companies who are operating at lightning speed. How to balance all of that in a way which is legally and ethically solid is a big challenge. And the biggest challenge I see is not so much understanding the matter and the challenges, but the speed at which those three parties evolve. Technology companies, they go lightning fast. People may easily adopt a new service, but not necessarily realize how it slowly changes their mentality and the way they perceive things and the way they do things or think about things. And of course, we all know that passing a new law or having a government provide the necessary supervision and governance on what's going on is slower than the speed of those technology companies. And this is where I see also a challenge. Should we slow down the technology companies because the rest of us cannot keep up? That is also an ethical question. Is it necessary to slow down technology companies, and for what reasons?
Thank you a lot, Bart. A few minutes ago, Anders mentioned the current challenges in terms of ethics, but now let's look forward. I would like to ask Nancy about your point of view about the future challenges in terms of ethics and AI.
You know, I was teasing that the benefit of having this really broad panel is you get so many perspectives. The bad news is any one of us could give a 45-minute talk on this particular area of expertise. So it's a huge, huge question. I do look really far out into the future. I think we're going to have a post-work future in which we're going to have to think more expansively about how do we distribute the productivity. You heard in the last panel, if you were here, AI is not the issue. It's how we navigate AI, right? How we construct it and how we distribute it. And you also heard that capitalism may not be the system with which it is we are most served in this new era. So the question will become what replaces this ability to be able to provide all the productivity that we believe that AI will be able to create in a way that is more fair and that is more equitable. I would argue that the last version of this in the industrial era worked very well for a smaller group of people. It didn't necessarily work as broadly for everyone, and created a lot of externalities that we didn't pay attention to around the environment, around a growing wealth gap, and around our own physical and emotional well-being. And so how do we try and design all this more thoughtfully as we move ahead? I think a lot about ethics is a construct that depends on where you are in time. 100 years ago, we thought it was okay to do surgery on babies because we didn't think that they could feel anything without anesthesia, right? It was okay to do surgery without anesthesia. And now we would think that that's a horrible thing to do. Right? We've treated animals really differently in the past than we are now, than we will in the future. So as our consciousness continues to expand and we start to become more aware of how interdependent, how connected we are to one another, the question will become how do we want to then relate with one another and what are the guidelines for that? And I always just go back to what are the economic incentives, right? What are the incentives to do the right thing? And I don't think it's necessarily always legal. I agree that regulation I do think has a place, but I always go back to where does the incentive structure get designed? In social media, the reason we went awry is that we decided that it was all driven toward a short-term profit goal, as opposed to the goal to be able to connect to one another. So I'm not answering your question as broadly as you would like, but I see a completely redesign of absolutely all of it. I think that we're at a moment in time where every single industry and construct, both business-wise and socially, is up for redesign. And so the question will be, what guides that? And for me, it's what am I leaving my children? Right? What kind of world do I want the next generation to have is my guideline.
Wonderful. Berge, as an outstanding consultant with such an interesting experience, I guess you have met a lot of companies during your career. Do you see any potential and international collaboration between companies in terms of ethical implementation?
Of course. There was a time when they were inventing AI companies by every 5 minutes. Most of them failed and never produced the result they set out to achieve. One of those companies you may remember was called General Magic. Anybody familiar with General Magic? Well, this was at a time when personal digital assistants were the new fad. They were not connected to anything, but they were what kept your information and your intelligence. And they created this world and society in which agents would act on behalf of their masters, and they would perform not just the mundane duties, but whatever instructions we gave to our third parties that would do their work for them. And in fact, I set up several different identities for myself, which would do my work, and that just allowed me to be free to do whatever I wanted and collect money. That way I would be liberated. But General Magic failed, and one day, all of a sudden, it stopped working. And unfortunately, when something stops in the middle and doesn't work anymore, you are disrupted. So we're in the middle of some kind of inflection point like that right now. Their word they're using these days, by the way, it was in the title of our session, called singularity, right? And probably very few people in this audience have understood the implications of singularity, that AI is now a part of our lives and extends the reach of what we do, and it's like a body double, or it's like having a capability beyond. And now when some company, a startup, fails, and all of a sudden singularity stops. Singularity doesn't work anymore. So we have to be very careful that we have a sustainable future with what is now called Armenian intelligence, because we have failed with artificial intelligence. So we're going to replace it. I think that was the last panel, right? Yeah. Nubar said we changed the name. So I think the question becomes, when we are in an era like this where we're proliferating so many AI startups, so many use cases for AI in every field, in every industry, when they fail and when it stops, when the company runs out of money or when their use case doesn't work, what are the implications in this so-called post-AI environment? That is, what do we do when it fails? And I think we need to be careful now to plan that future so that we can anticipate. Most startups do fail. Most new things fail. So what do we do then?
Well, even established companies fail, right? We're looking at 23andMe right now is facing a financial crisis and may fall apart. And we all gave it our DNA data when we went and...
I didn't give them anything.
I gave them only ancestry. I wouldn't let my children do the biological one.
Cool.
I don't know if
but
I made
that's a perfect example.
Right, and I gave them a false name. I didn't give my real name. So who knows, right? But it's just that thing, right? You trusted an entity to hold your data or hold your thing or a certain type of work, and then it starts to go away. I hear you.
We are running out of time, but good news, we still have a few minutes in order to ask another question, a very interesting one, and I hope you guys will be interested in the insights that are going to be provided by our speakers. And it's about wealth inequality. You know, as AI continues to advance, do you believe it will exacerbate or alleviate wealth inequality by 2040? What measures can be taken to ensure that AI's benefits are shared more equitably across society? And I would like to start with Stella, who is an expert. And please tell us more about that. You can, of course, mention the workplace transformation. You can link to it. So please feel free to.
I will take a page from the previous panel. I am paranoid optimist. Honestly, the humanity evolved over all of these ages, and technology we used from the access all the way to digital era and AI, and we always figure out a way to evolve and reimagine what a good life means, what wealth is, and figure out new sources of our ability to enjoy and benefit from the product of our work. So I am optimistic about the possibilities that AI can bring. And the belief in the humanities' ability to also ride the swings from one extreme to the next. And as also previously mentioned, we as humans have the responsibility to step into this conversation and shape where the world is going from the place of our influence, right? We may not necessarily be able to write a constitution for the future world, but we have ability to vote for the government that will be able to influence those decisions. We have the ability to report inadequate behavior or inappropriate use of AI in the workplace such that it's not impacting in a negative way huge or underprivileged segments. So I encourage all of us to step into that conversation and not be fatalistic and say, well, there's nothing that I can do. personally. You can influence small decisions. Maybe you can partner with others to influence bigger ones. And I think that's where the opportunities will come from.
Thank you. Francis, do you think that inclusion is a response to the increasing wealth inequality?
I think earlier panel talked about how the technology evolutions actually reduce the cost of computing, and that you could be in any emerging countries in Africa, in India, and have access to the usage of AI today, which is unimaginable in the past. And then, but then if you break down the AI foundational kind of building block is data, right? We talked about large language data, AI learn from that and then create value. But there is because people's creativity and also observation of this as being a very powerful technology, there is already a counter movement, for example, of a small language data or personal language data, data set thinking. So I work with a company based in San Diego called Personal AI. In this case, it's creating your repository of data, but you own it. The reason that a lot of the company create wealth today, especially in the technology area, is because they monetize your data for their gain. But imagine over time, if each one of us have agency over our own data, create our own database, then you, in theory, can monetize your own data at the time when you want to do that. And so there is a potential of redistributing the wealth out of the creation of a technological AI. So I think the answer is it could help the wealth redistribution, and by each citizen of the world participating in this AI revolution. But if we forego, like Stella says, if we forego that participation and just leave it to the technology company to kind of do it for us, then we risk increasing the gap.
Thank you, Francis. And Anders, from a public policy perspective, do you think is that so easy to regulate the increasing wealth inequality?
No, I do not think so. But I mean, on the one hand, there's a lot of talk about how the current AI is concentrating wealth, and there's a lot of concern about the future. But we have to take a step back, I think, and think that AI really is an potentially very enabling technology. Technology is neither inherently good or bad. I think we would give ourselves a good service if we focus on how AI can enable people. I mean, Francis Wong had a great example here. Governments can play a huge role. They can educate people not just to become AI experts, but how to take advantage of this potentially very enabling technology. They can provide funding for research and development. They can help smaller players, startups, SMEs. Developing countries should look at AI as an opportunity. They should make sure they attract investment. They should reduce trade barriers. They should welcome the flow of data and enable the citizens. AI, as we've been reading, has the potential for people with lower skills, with lower education levels, to catch up at a trajectory that is unparalleled to what we've seen before. Now, I know we have had the same discussion many years ago with the digital divide, but I think we must not lose focus on how AI potentially, if it's done right, with industry, with civil society, with government coming together, and really focusing how it can enable people to take advantage of this technology, I think that the end result does not have to be increased inequality.
Thank you so much. Bart, by the way, do you really think that technologies around identity screening and so on would help population in general to respond to underbankedness or to unbankedness situations?
Sorry, could you repeat to what? Respond to?
To respond to unbankedness. You know, today, they are such an important issue. So many people are not connected to the banking system. They can actually participate to the economy, and we need to understand what is the gap. That's why I wanted to ask you about this identity screening technology. Should that be the right response in order to better understand how we can, of course, respond to the increasing wealth inequality?
Yes, that's a question that has a lot to do with digital inclusion, whether it's for accessing financial services or what I'm more familiar with, governmental services. Digital inclusion is a challenge. Not all parts of your population are equally technologically savvy or have access to or have the means to buy the devices and internet services that are required to access such services online. So that's more a question of digital inclusion. The impact of AI on that, I think what it will enable in a lot of cases, okay, I'm going to press the reset button here. There are still a lot of countries who have to make the big leap forward. These countries are starting 30, 40 years behind what we would call the mainstream. And in such countries, the biggest challenge is, how can I take my entire population, have them registered, give them an identity so that they can all participate in this digital economy, so that they can all access government services or third-party services in an easy way. How can I apply that to my entire population in a matter of 3 to 5 years? There are countries in the world who are still dealing with that challenge and who are preparing to make that huge leap forward. AI can play a very positive role in these countries because it can help to register every citizen, assign an identity to that citizen, and bind the identity claims and attributes to that physical person. And AI can help a lot to reduce the percentage of fraud and in the registration process, which is of huge importance because identity is closely linked with trust. Your identity doesn't exist if it's not trusted. From your identity follows trust. You can prove that you are trustworthiness and somebody else can verify that. And so this trustworthiness needs to be built in from the start. If 20% of the people who are registered happen to be double registries, people trying to get 2 or 3 or multiple identities, or even non-existing people or whatever, then the identity scheme will fail, and everything else that follows from that will fail. AI can help to combat that fraud at the start, at the very starting point. Make sure that everybody is properly registered and can be then trusted by other people. So that's where AI comes in.
Thank you, Bart. I'm so sorry because we are running out of time. I will leave the floor to Nancy in order to share with us her perspective about the future of inequality. Is the metaverse also an interesting topic we can cover in order to better combat wealth inequality?
Yeah, it's funny because, again, I think that AI is only one of the many exponential technologies that are emerging and converging, right? When we start thinking about bioengineering, we start thinking about robotics, we think about the spatial computing world. So there's a whole basket of technologies. So when we start thinking about any of this, I hope that we think about it in a more broad way as opposed to just this one aspect of it. And I do think, on the one hand, the UN believes that we'll have 90% of the world connected to the internet within the next few years. And yet at the same time, we know that, again, you need energy and you need other pieces to get there. The part that I'm really focused on, actually, is the part in terms of, again, how does that technology get distributed? If it's only through startups and it's through businesses, in the United States, 98% of the funding goes to male-oriented companies. Only 2% of the funding goes to women-only founders, which is, to me, a pretty unbalanced way of looking about how we think about equality and inequality. We're seeing right now that 2 to 1 men are using generative AI more than women, so we need to get women more involved in this. Again, we start to think about it from an equality perspective. So I think there's a lot of questions that we've got on the table in terms of how we look at it for the future, but the hope is, again, the more broad that we can have people involved in it. Someone said recently, Brene Brown, AI people need people. We don't just need tech people. We don't just need business people. We need all of us thinking about this. And then I think we've got a better shot at being able to try and level the playing field. I think it really does present tremendous prosperity advantages. We describe it as an exponential productivity transformation, and Sam Altman will just probably describe it as an exponential prosperity transformation if we can make sure that we've got access more equal.
Thank you so much. By the way, Burj, you have met with several counterparties during your career, and could you please share with us your holistic view about the future of wealth inequality between companies and the populations?
So actually, we've said this several times, that today implementation of AI, the use of AI, has been to concentrate power and intelligence in much more centralized organizations and economic influences. I think what we need to transform is how AI is a distributed part of all of our lives, and we get to own the intellectual property of our own intelligence and our own legacy. I myself plan to allow my next generation to inherit my intelligence, because otherwise, next week when I die, it will disappear, and no one will have access to it. On the other hand, some of them could care less what it was or what it could be. But the more important thing is, I think generational wealth is a part of the future. It's a matter of finding ways to transmit that wealth down and allow people to benefit from it. I myself have tried to devote a large part of my time and effort to enabling others to become not just successful, but more importantly, to become productive and to benefit not just themselves, but a whole group of people around them. And I think certainly there are always times in society when we have that attitude that people want not just to use AI or intelligence to enrich themselves, but to enrich everyone. And I think we need to enter that period now, make a decision that that's our priority, and whether it's men or women, whether it's one race or another race or developing countries or not, we need to empower the individuals and not just enrich the largest companies.
Thank you so much. Before ending this session, I would like to share with you this conclusion. As you can see, there is a hope for our future. These experts talk about AI, and we can definitely understand that AI is under our leadership and responsibility. We need to continue advancing artificial intelligence development, but through an ethical comprehension of its own development. That's why I would like to ask you for a round of applause to our experts today who took their time in order to share with you these invaluable insights. And thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.